It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okay, hello. Welcome back to the carousel. Yes, I do not do these episodes enough, as everybody tells me, but we are here today with the very special episode with Jacob Wehmeyer.
Hello.
How do we say your name?
Wehmeyer. It's a good German name.
And so Jacob is joining us because he works for something called SLI, the States Leadership Initiative, which is a very DC-ish sort of thing. And SLI is attempting to be the NGO Destroyer. It's attempting to take on this massive network of NGOs that I feel like more and more we just learn seem to be the backing force or bulwark behind so much of this lefty nonsense, including this C. Weaver thing that just went viral that I was tweeting about her nationalizing all kinds of housing in New York City behind the Minnesota Somali people. There were a couple other issues we mentioned recently that we can kind of pin on the NGO network. What were you saying?
Yeah, no, it's so all-encompassing. We kind of internally it's like this fifth column of governance, and it ranges from these massive membership associations that have been around for 100 years. The American Bar Association is a perfect example of this. Some states are already pulling out of it. Then you have smaller organizations like we see in Minnesota. You know, we just recently identified this group called the Child Care Aware, and this is a national association that has state chapters. The state chapter partnered with the Minnesota government to essentially like usher Somalians into creating daycare centers. And they had this great promotional video where they just explained like, hey, if they don't know how to do it, we have a navigator, that's what they call it, a navigator, that'll go and file all the paperwork and get them grants and everything they need to get started and set up. And the school that they featured had 5 violations. Every year that they opened, they had a violation for like kids not washing hands, no teachers were certified, all of it's public, and they just get the money. And all of the initiatives that the left kind of wants to get done, if they can't get it done legislatively, then it happens through an NGO, and inevitably these get funding from the government.
Okay, so yeah, I remember sort of my first consciousness of this was with James O'Keefe and Acorn. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that whole thing?
No, that might have been a little bit before my time.
So James O'Keefe, you obviously know who James O'Keefe is.
Yeah.
So so for people who are listening, he is the guy who likes pretending to be a homosexual and catfishing people at like various lefty institutions or like various banks or like things, and they get him to come and talk shit on camera, and it's a hidden camera, and he like outs them. And his first thing that he got really famous for was Acorn. There was this like Obama era. This is like, yeah, probably a little before your time. There was this like Obama era horrible NGO called Acorn that, you know, ostensibly helped poor people. But he dressed as a pimp with like a prostitute around him, because, you know, he's very theatrical, so he really likes like dressing up. So he dressed up as this like elaborate pimp. And he went in and he asked them for like advice on how to like launder money as a pimp and how to like sex traffic more people. And they just like gave him advice on it. They were like, oh yeah, you want to like, here's how you break the law. And so he destroyed Acorn. Literally Acorn like got totally defunded because he did this whole like sting on them. So yeah, these things are completely out of control. Maybe we can start by you saying what is, because okay, is SLI an NGO itself? What is an NGO? It's a non-governmental organization, but what does that actually mean? What's different between NGO and a nonprofit? Yeah.
Yeah, this is where it kind of, whenever you start to look into this, you kind of start feeling like Charlie from It's Always Sunny with the red lines, and you just start looking crazy. These NGOs is a much more of a broad term that pretty much describe like a 501c3, a nonprofit organization that does some type of activity or advocacy, and it could be literally anything. It could range from policy development. It could be just organizations that are teaching people how to do terrible things, possibly get themselves arrested.
Wait, your sound just totally lost. You just like it's got talk again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go. Now it's perfect.
Okay.
I think it just fell in there.
Sorry. Yeah. So NGO is sort of this murky term. Generally, these are all going to be these nonprofit organizations that just do something, and this something is very nondescript. So some of these will do policy development. One of the things that we go after a lot, where we had this big report come out called the Shadow Government Report. This was an identifying, I think it was 26, 27 of these massive membership associations that all do policy development and push leftist ideology into state governments. That's like one function. Then you'll have what you see in New York, which is this weird incestuous thing where the state takes over a facility, like a bunch of units, and then they let NGOs do the renovations for obscene fees. So that would be another example of the activity. We're seeing them set up NGOs that help set up the daycares, NGOs that also help set up, refugee resettlement. It's literally any sort of kind of, when someone wants something done and they can't get it immediately done legislatively, it seems to then be outsourced to a nonprofit organization. These are all going to be nonprofits. That's the underlying thing here. But they just all do varying different things. And now it's become this massive patronage scheme of just either without a better way of saying it, laundering money into the Democrat Party or into the left ostensibly, or getting what they want done in ways that nobody kind of understands because it's just in this pile of alphabet language, like alphabet organizations.
Right. So is there any difference, though, between an NGO and a nonprofit? Or it's just the same words for the same thing?
It's the same words for the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. For whatever reason, people like calling these things NGOs.
NGO definitely rolls off the tongue better.
It's an NGO. It sounds more powerful for some reason. That's actually a good question. I don't think I've ever actually fully thought about really what the difference is until now, and I guess there really isn't one. And then so how you say that this is a way for power to get around the legislative process or getting people elected. So how do they do that? How are they used exactly?
Yeah, so I have a great example that we identified last year, and this is sort of after the Free Beacon. I'll just tell the story. The Free Beacon earlier last year, they came out with this report, this article about how Georgia's Medicaid. So every few years, every state, they will send out what's called an RFP. It's a request for proposal. This is basically to open up the contracts for a government program. So state Medicaid programs are managed by a private insurance provider. So those insurance providers then have to develop a contract, whatever. The people overseeing this process in Georgia implemented a bunch of questions, essentially litmus tests for leftist loyalty within it. And some of these were actually essentially asking if they would break Georgia law. So the big thing in Georgia is the child transgender healthcare. One of these questions was about a child transgender and how they would suit this child's needs. And if any insurance provider did not say that they would provide consulting on future hormone treatment, then they got low scores. And then these low scores were enough in many cases to select out for previous health insurance providers. And then you go and look at who managed this. And the head of the DCH, who oversaw this entire process, was also the president-elect of one of these NGOs that we've identified called the National Association of Medicaid Directors. And in their policy, their white papers, their initiatives, they push for this sort of stuff. So then this is one of the avenues is there's no legislative oversight. Nobody knows. They just go directly to the bureaucrats through these membership organizations and tell them how to govern. And then they end up governing that way.
So what was the upshot of that situation that you're saying? So like were certain insurers deprived of a license? Like were they not allowed? So they weren't allowed to.
The big thing was that one of the larger previous insurers for the state of Georgia, I think this was Peach Care, they lost their contract. They had a contract with Georgia for the past 10 years. They lost their contract. And that put, I think the estimates when I was reading about it was up to 1.2 to 1.7 million people would then have gaps in health coverage because the new firms that were chosen did not have programs set up across the state of Georgia. So you had a lot of people there now essentially going to find gaps in their health insurance in about 6 months. And part of the reason is because of this politicization, which was motivated by these membership groups and NGOs that just go straight to the bureaucrats.
So, but I still don't understand how did the insurers suffer? Like how did it make them not? I'm confused. What was the actual end game of the like?
The end game was to select for insurance providers that passed leftist litmus.
Right, I know, but I'm saying the ones that didn't. What happened?
The ones that did not pass those tests.
Yes.
Oh, they lost on massive contracts, which for them is a lot of money. We're talking about like
so it's not like they were banned from operating. They just lost on.
Yeah, they lost on the Medicaid contract, and then for people,
they lost on the Medicaid contracts. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, that one's a little tougher because you're like, well, I mean, I completely agree, obviously, but it's like they'll say, well, we're allowed to shape that sort of thing. If it's a public contract, right? They'd say, well, we're in charge of the public, so we're allowed to shape those as we want, right?
The concerning part about that was the year previously. So the process started in 2023, and in 2023, Georgia specifically banned, they passed a law banning all services for transgender care for children. Right. And so then if they did not say that they would provide consultation for this, then they did not get selected. And this is just straight up violating. I was talking
it's like undermining really the will of the
that's
the
people. That's the big core of it. Yeah. For these big, we call it the shadow government. For those organizations, their main function is to literally just undermine the will of the people and the people that they elect.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's totally true. It's very true that's what's happening. So what can SLI do to stop this? I mean, how do we? It seems like this is a march through the institution sort of thing, in the sense that how long have they been working on this project? I mean, you really got to give it to the left. They're so good at this shit. They're so good at these sneaky things. And you're right, like putting the question in of, how would you groom these trans kids if you were in charge? What would you do? It's incredible. And does the right have any answer for that? So I mean, besides just talking about it?
Yeah. So there's a few things actually. This is kind of a bit of a white pill here. Is that one? You're starting to see right wing kind of association groups that are parallel to these be brought up, be created. A great example of this, and it's kind of boring, but it's an important one, is the SFOF. This is the State Financial Officers for Freedom or something. But this is sort of a right wing adjacent, or at best just actually nonpartisan and maybe a little bit more right wing. The other big thing is you're starting to hopefully see so some states are already decoupling themselves from these organizations, and we're working on getting a bunch of legislation passed in various states to investigate, to pull funding and whatnot. Texas is a great example of this. They just, I think today, announced that they're pulling out of the American Bar Association.
Yeah. Oh, the American Bar Association. Yeah. So not the Texas State Bar, because that's a totally different thing. What is the American Bar Association?
So the American Bar Association It's about 100 years old. It's a little over 100 years old. A lot of these institutions are so old, but this was the organization that accredited universities for their law programs. So for you to go and kind of take a bar, from my understanding of how this works, I haven't taken a bar, but for you to go and take a bar, typically you'd go to a law school that had to be accredited by the American Bar Association. So and immediately, like, you go and look on their website and it's just like the worst things ever. It's like diversity statements, inclusivity requirements, pushing leftist agenda and whatnot.
ABA accredited, right? And that's like, no, I think it's for the school. It's not about the. Yeah, I think it's like you want ABA accreditation for the school.
Yeah, and
that's how you know it's a legit law school.
Yeah, and so Texas is withdrawing from that because the ABA is also heavily politicized, and it pretty much functions like all these other organizations, pushing leftist agenda either subtly or not so subtly. And so they're pulling out of that, which is really white pilling. We have a bunch of legislation in the works right now. All the sessions are starting up. A big way to get states to decouple from this is that every state pays membership dues to these groups, at least the ones that we've identified, these kind of larger NGOs that push policy. They pay money either directly to the organization through membership dues every year. And some of these are a lot. Some of these are like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Some of these are a bit smaller. And they also, will pay for training materials and for travel, for conferences and conference attendance. And all of these things go to fund these organizations. So getting that money withdrawn, which is what we're working on a lot right now, is a great way to kind of start actually having results and not just talking about it.
Okay, so when Texas pulls out of the ABA, that's actually going to be really interesting because I went to law school and like going to a non-accredited law school would have been like unthinkable back then. That would have been like the worst thing in the world. But does that mean then that like UT Austin will then no longer be ABA accredited? Probably.
I don't think so. I think the universities could still be accredited and they could still want to be accredited. It just would no longer be a requirement in the state of Texas. And what's interesting is when you look at the history of Texas, this was only a thing that started so the ABA requirements for universities, this has varied within states for the last 100 years. Texas was only in the 1980s. So the Supreme Court of Texas, I think, used to handle their own accreditation of universities. And then it was in the 1980s they started outsourcing this to the ABA, and then they now have pulled that out about 50 years later.
I see. Well, I mean, I think that probably does, though, mean that the state schools will not be ABA accredited anymore.
Probably that might be.
Yeah. But it's true. It's like I think that hopefully what people are waking up to is that ABA accreditation means nothing. It's who cares? It's the most superficial, nonsensical thing in the world. Like no one, I mean, maybe long ago that would have mattered, but now it's completely irrelevant. And especially if they're pushing people around, right, that's definitely an interesting thing. I mean, this seems to be part of the larger shearing apart of the institutions anyway. I mean, University of Austin, for example, they're not accredited, right? But they're not a law school, but they're not an accredited program, you know? And so it's but more and more people are okay, what does that mean? It's not accredited. So, it's funny that we're at this place in history where it's the institutions have just gotten so rotten. And there's just so many grifts like this. I mean, even without the political influence, there's just so many of these ridiculous, hollowed out institutions. As
they've lost their respect, right? And some of this is just because of the grifts, of the way that they kind of get their money. This is a super niche one, but my boss is really passionate about it. He's a big woodworking guy, and there's this thing called the American Civil Lumber Society or something. And they do all of the certifications for every lumber mill for the wood that you use in your houses. And this organization, again, this is 100 years old. It's from the 1930s or something. They have now become a mechanism for regulatory capture for corporate consolidation of lumber mills. This is all they do now. It's $2,500 a month. Most lumber mills can't afford this, the smaller ones. And then you look at some states like Alaska and Maine, Idaho, and there's another one where they just pulled all the accreditations from this organization, all the requirements for lumber mills, and they set up their own programs, their own state-run programs to certify lumber mills for the use of their lumber for local construction. So like for a long time, Alaska, all the houses being built there were being used with Canadian lumber because the smaller lumber mills in Alaska, which is a huge export out of Alaska's lumber, all the lumber mills there, they couldn't get their wood approved for homes. It's crazy. So as you see like all these institutions lose their legitimacy through grifts or politicization, then people just don't care anymore. And they're like, what does this matter? And then you start seeing kind of the impetus to get states to pull out, or you kind of start seeing this motivation.
Totally. So this is a states issue because basically I'm assuming these organizations are impinging states' ability to operate.
Yeah, we're really focused on states. This is kind of what we do. We don't really dabble too much with the federal. We think that there's one of our big focuses is that there's a lot of untapped power and within states that conservatives just decide not to use because maybe they forgot about it or something. So that's one of the reasons why we're very focused in states. But yes, the NGOs, the ones that we identified, they are incredibly harmful, especially in Republican states. All of them, they're all members of these groups because they have the legacy of authority and of expertise, and then behind that, they push all this stuff to overtly subvert the populace. And then we're like, no, this just shouldn't be happening. This is ridiculous. Why are you paying for people that hate you to destroy you? This makes no sense. So that's why we're really focused in the states. We think that there's a lot more room in there for action, and we're starting to see that.
So what's motivating these organizations? I mean, why are they so against the interests of the states or against the interest of the people who use the certifications that they're providing or use whatever resources they're providing? Because it sounds like you're not actually talking about left-wing lobbying NGOs. It's not like you're talking about the ACLU or whatever, right? Yeah. Like you're talking about things that are ostensibly nonpartisan, but actually they've been not regulatory captured. They've been institutionally captured, whatever, by people with an agenda. So how does that happen?
I think a big part of this is just kind of the march through the institutions, right? As people, as the universities kind of created this class of intellectual expertise that all have a very, very obvious and unilateral political agenda, that they then get involved in these membership organizations. And these membership organizations, they push these things as best practice. And I mean, you go to a leftist, right? You go to someone who believes in all this stuff, and you say, this is one of our big ones that we focus on is the NAMD. And these are the Medicaid directors, because Medicaid's such a massive budget. And you go and they'll push papers. We saw one paper that they had saying that medical providers need to reduce the proportion of white staff for cultural competency and appropriateness. And you go talk to them about it, and they just believe it. Like, they just be like, yeah, this is the best practice. That's why we recommend it. This is what we want them to do. This is just what they want. They believe in it, and then they push it. And in many cases, the bureaucrats, they either just don't know any better, or there's maybe a pull of people that want to govern others, and these people typically end up just maybe being left wing. And
it does feel like that. It's like it feels like these are sort of tyrannical people. I mean, I talk about this every single time, but it's a Robert Conquest thing. It's this is just eventually people who are interested enough in hating you are so interested in your thing that they'll take it over. Unless you have really serious internal immune systems in the shape of rules that prevent people from hating your institution to take it over. Eventually, over a long enough time scale, the great irony is that your institution that is supposed to stand for, lemmings will get taken over by the things that eat lemmings because they want to eat the lemmings.
Yeah,
So,
I know we talked
yeah.
about it earlier, but like the
Yeah.
Sierra Club is a perfect example
Right.
of this, right?
Yeah.
It was a environmental organization. They believed in, they were like kind of the degrowth people. They were like, we need less people in the United States, no immigration, because immigration means more consumers means more pollution. And then over time, the Sierra Club now denounces John Muir. They had this whole thing about how awful he was, and John Muir was the founder. And then they kind of took over the whole thing. And now it's just your typical kind of lefty environmentalism nonprofit that also believes in all of like this sort of global trade neoliberalism that lefties also believe in that destroys the environment. So
Right. Financialization. What did John Muir do wrong?
oh no, John Muir, he didn't do what he did wrong. He was,
According to them,
John Muir was like all other people from
canceled?
his time. Yeah, he got canceled. He got
We're
canceled.
canceling John Muir.
Yeah, they canceled John Muir
Wow.
because he was racist, but he was from the late 19th century, early 20th century, so of course, like, okay, but yeah, he got canceled for pretty much that. He got canceled for being born back then. That's pretty much what happened.
Because he was like on the record saying we got to keep the.
Oh, he was also like a typical racist and like some other
Yeah,
stuff like that.
I see.
He didn't like Native Americans for a bunch of reasons.
I see. Oh, I didn't realize. John Muir was. There's all kinds of Muir stuff in California. They better
you go to
They
Mammoth.
better rename that stuff.
Yeah, you go to Mammoth and it still says the mountains are calling, and that's a very famous John Muir quote. He founded Yosemite. He was the guy who founded and created Yosemite as like a national park, pretty much.
Jeez. Well, so the latest thing that I'm thinking about with NGOs is this thing that just happened that I didn't uncover it. It was in the Wall Street Journal, but nobody reads the Wall Street Journal. So there was like a piece in there about C. Weaver, who's one of these, I call them global rich kid communists. That's my latest name for them. They're these people who, for some reason, are so angry at America, or maybe it's their parents or whatever it is, that they dedicate their lives to basically the project of global communism, right? Mm-hmm. And so many of these people exist inside these NGOs. That's like a major job for a person who finds themselves politically interested in. They wake up in the morning and they go get their cup of coffee, and what is driving them through the day? It's the thought of dismantling the great racism and white supremacy that has, is disenfranchising these people that they don't even hang out with, but apparently exists somewhere. So this woman, C. Weaver, is that how you say her name? Is it Key?
I think so. I would guess it's probably like Cia or something.
CEA, which is actually a great name. C. Weaver is a sick name, especially for like a white woman. It's like a great fucking name. But she's from somewhere, and she is like a dismantler. And it was discovered that in 2019 in New York City, she pulled this kind of trick where I think she was an NGO person, or maybe she was elected, but it doesn't really matter. She was behind the passage of a law that made it so that landlords can't do two things. They can't, one, use rent increases to pay for improvements, which is weird. And then two, they can't like raise the rents on a unit that a person moved out of, which is pretty nuts. Like that's very extreme. I mean, like I'm actually sympathetic to like the lefties on landlord shit because I've been a renter before and it sucks. So like I get it, but that's very extreme in the sense that, well, you're never going to make any money. There's no point in buying a building. It's a losing proposition, right? So it kind of screws up the whole system. But in any case, not only did they pass these laws, those laws led to the total devaluation of huge amounts of real estate investments for obvious reasons. Because now you thought, oh, this thing's going to go up in price. Whoops. No, it's not, because you can't raise the rents.
Yeah.
So people, so it's never going to go. Your building is now not worth anything because it's got a bunch of people living in there that are paying $300 a month since 1980, and you can't raise the rents, even if they move out. And I get why they do that, because they don't want you to bang pots in their head to make them move out. I get it, but it's still like, all right, well, then you just did the opposite. You just made it so that the building is now worth nothing for the person who bought it. So anyway, they did that. And so all these buildings suddenly went to zero, the value. And the banks that were supporting the loans on these buildings, one of them went defunct. And suddenly they can't pay the bill. There's actually multiple of them. And so they can't keep it up. They try to sell the portfolio of the loans on the buildings. They can't sell it. But the government passed this law, so they're like, well, what the fuck do you want us to do here? So the only option that they have is to give over the management, and I think in some instances the actual ownership, but I think mostly just the management, over to NGOs. So what that adds up to, that's a lot of complicated talking, but put very, very simply, that is nationalizing $15 billion worth of apartments, because you took them from people, you made them valueless, and then they couldn't sell them because they suddenly have no value. And then what do? You put the NGOs that you fucking work for in charge of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fucking insane. Like, that's real communism. That's like actual real life fucking communism. That's not even woke. That's like literally a taking, as we say in law school. Yeah. So but again, the part of that you couldn't do that without NGOs, and guess where the NGOs are funded? They're funded by the friggin' union, like some sort of public.
Is it the tenants union or whatever?
No, I don't. Is it a tenants union? It's some sort of it's funded by some kind of public entitlement sort of thing.
Yeah, there was that.
What?
I saw when I read it, there was another part that was saying that so after the buildings, the dilapidated buildings that can't be worked on because of this law that happened, those units, then all renovations for, I think it was rent stabilized units, had to be done by one of these NGOs.
Yeah. Oh,
and
I'm
these
sure.
NGOs were, it was, yeah, in the article, it was anywhere between, some of them were getting 250,000.
Yeah.
And some of them were getting north of 350,000.
Right. To renovate an apartment. And I guarantee you it's like a renovator of color.
Yeah.
That's that's getting paid 3 times more. So it's just such bullshit that this is helping anybody. All you're doing is just taking it from one person and giving it to another, basically. Yeah. With under the guise of we need to do this with tenants' rights. I mean, again, I understand the argument and I understand the anger on that issue, but at the end of the day, like all communist things, it just ends up making it more power imbalanced and shittier, kind of.
Yeah,
in the end.
I mean, if you looked at, so on Mamdani's first day as mayor, he did this little stunt where he went to this woman's apartment and it was in the worst conditions ever. It was completely destroyed. It was looking terrible. And all of the tiles, he was pulling the tiles off with his hands, right? And then people looked into it, and it was a rent stabilized unit managed by a nonprofit. It was
look at these conditions from these bankers.
So bad.
Oh, whoops.
They create these slums, and then it gets managed by the state. And then the worst part is, I think when I was reading in that article at the very end, they note that I think it might have been the New York City, Manhattan Housing Authority, whatever it was. They had this slush fund that's devoted to renovations, and they were short. They were short by, I think it was 30,000 units. that need to be renovated. Each of these get like, 350,000. Do the napkin math, and they're short by like $2 billion to do these renovations anyway. So then this becomes another impetus to, well, we're going to like tax the ultra wealthy. And then, I think it was either Sia Weaver. It might not have been Sia Weaver. It might have been another one of his staff, because his staff is just so obscene and terrible, that overtly said, like, we just want to tax white people more to pay for all of this. Like, they were just honest about it. They're just so flagrant about it. So it becomes this motivation. We're going to tax the white people to pay for the renovations for the rent stabilized units that are dilapidating because they're managed by the NGOs, but they're going to be renovated by the NGOs that were managing them that were dilapidated. It's like, it's this Ouroboros of evil, awful that just gets bigger and bigger because they keep taking injections from the taxpayer.
Well, and it's paved with good intentions. This is the part that it's like, the thing that I like about Mamdani and about Sia Weaver is like, they're true believers, right? I always have more respect for a true believer than like a total cynic. Like somebody like Bill de Blasio strikes me as like, he doesn't believe in anything really anymore. Like maybe at one point he started out believing, but really he's just a complete empty shell. And even somebody like who's actually is also a communist, who's part of this same team, who's the Minnesota guy, of course. And we'll shift to Minnesota.
Talking about Walt?
Yeah, Walz. Walz is an actual communist. He's like Chinese. Like he's involved with China. I mean, not that China's communist, because they're not. They're actually fascist. But he is a believer in global communism, right? Like that's what he is in his soul. And that's probably what de Blasio started as. But both of those guys are so cynical. They're so fake. Everything they do is fucking fake, right? They don't believe in anything. They believe in getting their way, right? And they're so jaded over years of having to play the game that there's just like no soul there left. And it's so obvious. That's why they don't win, because they're just so obviously fake. But Mamdani and this Sia lady and all these people, they are actually still kind of like believers. Like they really think that they're going to change the world. They really think we are going to make the world better for the working person, right? Like, or maybe not even the working person, just like the black, not white people, because definitely not white people, but the disenfranchised brown person of the world who has been downtrodden by the white man, who, by the way, makes up 6% of the entire globe, but of course is to blame for every single fucking problem. And so, but they really believe that, man. I mean, they really fucking think they're gonna do it. And I have a certain level of respect for that, because it's like, all right, well, you really do care. It's just, that's also why they're 10 times more dangerous, because like they really are gonna fucking fuck shit up.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of like, you have to give them credit for how like honest they are. We're looking at organizations, when the ones that we kind of had done a deep dive into have been kind of, legislatively attacking and kind of building this sort of coalition with people to go after. These are ones that they'll still hold the guise of being nonpartisan. They're just the experts. They're just trying to do what's right. Mamdani's sitting there going, like, in one of his speeches, like, we're going to redo, like reveal, what is it? What did he say? He said, realize the true American project, which is just turning New York into a communist hellhole. He's like, you want to turn New York into South Africa. And they don't
the
have
real American project has always been, because he read the poem. He read the Emma Lazarus poem. He's like, that's what the Constitution is, right? It's give me your poor huddled masses. Isn't that what it says? It's like, no, man. Like, well, anyway, he's a destroyer. He's gonna try. What he's really mad about, just like every communist, is that he got excluded at some time in his life, and he sat there and he said, "I am going to fuck them up, no matter what I do. I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to tearing down these people who have deprived me of some fucking thing that I was supposed to get along the way," basically.
It's so funny because like yeah, at some point there has to be, or maybe we're just projecting, but I also believe like this guy had like one bad experience. I remember someone dug up some like essay he wrote about getting rejected by a girl in college. And,
who, Mamdani?
Yeah. This is like this whole thing. And he was very upset about it. She chose a guy of a different group, but Yeah, no, like you gotta wonder what is it that did it, because you go and look at this guy's background and he's had the most coddled, like happy life ever. His dad was like a professor that was funded by some American NGO that brought him into the United States. He's like been living lavishly his entire life. They've always been rich. They were the richest, like 0.1% of Uganda. And they go to
Yeah.
America, they're still rich. You know, he goes to a good school, he gets educated, and he still hates his country and wants to remake the entire project. And and you just gotta wonder, like, what happened, because you live in rent stabilized apartments, but you're going to like Michelin sushi restaurants. Like, people are taking pictures, like, why is this guy paying like $700 for omakase when he's paying in a rent stabilized apartment? What's going on
Right.
here? But supposedly something really bad must have happened for him to want to literally destroy the world.
I think it's what communism always has been, which is not even just communism, all reactionaryism, including on the right, by the way, at least in part, is disaffected elites, right? It's like the bottom half of the elites that are so pissed off that they're not in the first half of the elites that they form this whole ideology about how to tear down everything else. I mean, I think that that's what kind of strikes me as Mamdani. I mean, particularly somebody like him, because he must have spent his whole life going to schools with lots of white people. And he's very white coated, but he's not exactly white, but he's also very fancy. His mom's a filmmaker. You know,
Yeah.
he's got this kind of pedigree, but he probably felt his whole life, well, but I still can't get into that the special room where the whites really are white.
He didn't get
You
invited to the
know, like,
ballroom in France. He didn't get
right.
invited to those fancy balls, and that's what made him really upset and want to destroy the
Yeah.
world.
And it's like, look, I get being pissed about that shit. I really do. And I get, like, look, I mean, a lot of the groundwork for the dissident right is about the exclusion of white guys, right, from the institutions. But I think the answer to that is, do you really want to just completely tear the whole fucking thing down? Like, or do you try to kind of succeed within it? And it's like, to me, he seems like a guy who really wants to destroy it. You know, he
Yeah.
really, and I think that's kind of the thing that's animating that whole side. And we've shifted. I mean, all right, let's talk about Minnesota. So, what's your take on what's going on in Minnesota with ICE or with the Somalians or any of it?
So I think, there's been a lot of worry. I think just to do like a sort of side tangent on the ICE thing. There's been a lot of worry about now all of these videos coming out of like ICE doing these daytime raids in the streets, and people have been, there are these libertarians, they're like, they could just be going to the prisons and picking them up from the prisons and like doing other things, which actually that's ICE's like written policy, is what they've been doing. This is why you don't see this sort of videos in like red states, because in red states they just go and essentially just sit outside of prisons and wait for illegal immigrants to get released, and they just put them on a bus and ship them out, right,
Oh,
and send
interesting.
them overseas.
That's
Blue
interesting.
states, they don't allow this. They don't allow for ICE to pick up illegal immigrants when released from prison. And they have told them, they said, look, if you do not, the stated policy was that if you do not let us go to the prisons and just pick up the criminals, then we will have to go into the communities and
Mm,
get them. And then they said was that every single illegal immigrant that they encounter while going after these criminals that have been allowed to re-enter the community after exiting prison, they also will arrest them and deport them. So when we see like all of these raids and people have been getting very squeamish about it, and I can kind of understand why. Some of the videos are pretty brutal, but the reason why is because blue states are choosing this. This is instead of just
hmm
reporting literally like the gang members that they've arrested for doing like terrible things, instead of just allowing for that to happen, they want ICE to have to go into the cities where then these activist groups that train people, right? We've seen the documentation now that's
Yes,
been leaked,
yes.
training and even awarding people with bonuses for acts of heroism and getting arrested. They want this sort of friction and they're trying to create it. So I don't,
Yeah.
I understand why people are squeamish, but this is not ICE's fault. I think that's the most like plain obvious part of this is literally entirely on the governments of these states. They want this to happen.
So I actually haven't seen any of these really bad videos. What is happening on these bad videos?
Like the most recent one that I saw people getting really squeamish about was this video outside of a Target of a guy who and some like leftists went and they clipped the video so you don't see the whole thing, which is like, of course they do. But pretty much what happened was this guy punched an ICE agent and then they tackled him to the ground and arrested him in front of a Target. And people have been like freaking out about this, about how horrifying it is. And besides that, because they think it's bad optics or it looks bad or it's violent. You have the martyr maids, these sorts of people that just
martyr maid was going against that.
They don't have the stomach for the mass deportations that over half the country voted for.
Right.
But yeah, people are getting very upset, and all of this, of course, is in the wake of what was really sad, right? The what was her name, Renee Good or whatever. Her accelerating her car into an ICE agent, and then after that being neutralized because she was a threat. Obviously, like, loss of life is bad. That's very sad. I'm not going to cheer that on, but they're encouraged to do this, and they're taught to do this by these groups, and you kind of start to see the exposure of all of these networks and how they've kind of circled around these blue cities and operating, where they set up the programs that get the illegal immigrants in, and that they set up the programs to protest them getting out, and then these protests turn into significantly worse. But when it comes to the actual ICE thing itself, I think it's good that they're going to Minnesota. The important part that we try and really push, we try and really tell, the people that we work with, legislatures, whatnot, is that what's happening in Minnesota is not only happening in Minnesota. The mass fraud that has been now uncovered, I think it's north of like 10 billion now of just like Medicaid fraud in that state. That's not only in Minnesota. That's going to be in every state, red or blue. This is happening. And the response probably should be the same, right? Which is these NGOs need to be investigated. They need to be rated for their paperwork, and the money laundering through these programs that are set up, whether it's the autism treatment, the Feed Our Future thing, or the daycare centers, those also need to be heavily investigated and looked at. Because at best, we're finding these organizations that just straight up are not meeting state requirements for cleanliness, for procedure, for certification, and at worst, they literally just have no kids for them, and they're driving Bugattis on the street. Like, there's nothing good happening here. It all needs to get investigated.
Yeah, well, that one's just such an easy one, right? Yeah. I mean, actually, that was something that I think people didn't, everybody said all this fraud, but they didn't quite notice right away how simple it was. It was really, really dumb. It was like the dumbest. It was just that's why these are so easy to catch. It takes one journalist literally walking outside their house and going down to the thing to immediately see this is total bullshit. Because it was one day the health, the child cares of Minneapolis area were billing $3 million, and then the next year they were billing $300 million, and it was what happened? And then it's everything is Somalian. Every single application is Somalian. I mean, it was the most obvious thing in the entire world. And you have this guy, Jacob Frey, man. Jacob Frey, what the fuck is his name?
Yeah, that's his name. Jacob Frey. He's the mayor. He's the guy who he bowed to George Floyd's tomb.
What is that guy's problem, man? What is his fucking problem? What is he doing?
I don't know. I don't know what this guy is. He does his campaign events in Somali, or he's on video speaking the Somali. I think it's literally called Somali, their language. Yeah, he's a freak. I mean, someone asked him are they going to try and arrest ICE agents, and he just said no because there's too many of them. Which that's probably good. That's a good thing. I saw that.
Right, yeah. But he was no, we can't. They have bigger guns than us.
Yeah, they have more people and bigger guns. We can't do it. And it's
but so he strikes me. He is a true march through the institutions guy, but he's also. He's empty. He's not one of these Mamdani people. He probably has the same beliefs-ish. But does he really? I mean, he's some handsome, rich Jewish kid, right? Who went to Princeton. Where did he go? He went to somewhere.
I don't know where he went, but yeah, he does.
But it's like, what is his fucking problem, man? Like, it's like he's not a global communist, is he? Like, why is he doing this? Just to stay in power? Like, what is driving him? I don't get somebody like that at all.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know enough about Jacob Frey's background. All I know is he's just the worst. He's like one of these typical like blue core city Dems that just does the worst things, believes in the worst things, and his policies resort and not only his policies, like literally everything he does just results in more pain and suffering for all sorts of people. Like, if they weren't doing the fraud, this wouldn't be happening. That's the really short and easy way of putting it. If it wasn't being allowed, and the crazy part was that it was entirely being allowed. There was an investigation done on this in like 2018. They didn't prosecute anybody. The judges, they'll let people go. But there was a guy who it was a couple, and they had a fake medical center like registered to a PO box, and the jury unanimously gave him a guilty verdict, and the judge just let him go. She just threw out the verdict. She said, "No, I'm just going to quit him." And so we find that in these states, when the fraud is then exposed, they just like don't care and let it happen anyways. I think this is just part of the grift. Is we're going to let them commit these obscene crimes, and then it's fine because we'll just get our votes.
Right. Yeah, somebody's saying he's a carpetbagger. I guess that's what it's. So is that what is that? I guess that term's been around forever. Which is about
carpetbagger was to describe Yankees, post-Civil War Yankees that went down into the South and kind of changed the South because they had money after what's his name? Was it Sherman? After he went and like salted the fields and burned everyone's plantations down and like and got rid of all the money. Then you had a lot of these kind of northern investors come in, and then they kind of restructured the South in many ways. So I think now it's kind of like yuppie's not the right term, but I think carpetbaggers, just somebody from the Northeast that had a lot of money, they moved somewhere else and they just change it.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a guy on here speaking of this, which a Templar, or however the hell you say his name, and his whole argument was that America needs a new Reconstruction. And what happened with Reconstruction after the Civil War is basically they just came in and dispossessed all the aristocratic families in the South and just like redid everything.
Yeah.
Like we need to do that with NGOs. Like basically we need to just dispossess the NGOs. Like we need to just be like, nope, you're done.
Yeah.
You're done. You're out.
Anymore. Yeah. Minnesota was a particularly just insane case. So we found this this whole situation that went pretty viral for us. We're pretty small and we're pretty new, but even Matt Walsh mentioned it on the show, which is pretty cool. But
nice.
This was this organization that was partnered with the Minnesota government that would go and they would set up daycare centers. And for people that didn't know how to set up daycare centers, they would do all the paperwork for them, and they would get all of the grants, all the money. They would help them get all of it so that they could set up. And when you look at that organization, so we originally found this, it was like a rabbit hole. We started with all the ones that we look into are these sort of alphabet letter association groups. So first started with the Minnesota Child Care Association. And we're going to start there because these people are crazy. They have two really interesting policy advocacy positions. So they don't set up daycare centers. This is not what they do. They're on the side of influencing policy within the state for whatever means that they have. And the two main interesting things are, one, they wanted to make sure that state funds and state programs are still accessible to children that refused immunization, or families that refused immunization protocols for the state. And so this becomes very weird, where you have a state like Minnesota, a Democrat state. These are very pro-vaccine people, whatever, or like ostensibly probably should be, given the paradigm. But they specifically are anti-vax in their state, where they have a lot of these migrant groups that don't take these vaccines, that object to these sorts of things. So now they're advocating for policy that they don't even believe in, but it's because the people they brought in want that, which is kind of interesting. The other
thing really is, when you see stuff like that, you start to realize that, and this is kind of what I'm talking about, trying to really understand what people like Mamdani and Sia Walker are doing. When you get to a fact like that, which is such an insane fact that you just said, you start to realize, oh, the point is just straight dismantling.
Yeah.
That's the whole fucking point. The point is not equality. The point is not anything besides just destruction. It's just, we are going to fuck up white guys.
Yeah.
Because we don't like them. Basically.
It's not even like some super like rich like private school with a bunch of like anti-vax people that are all like health nuts like Brian Johnson or whatever. It's not even that. It's literally just, hey, these people don't feel comfortable taking these vaccines, but they should still be able to be in child daycare centers.
Yeah. And if it was a white person doing that, and if that was a white person Christian, it would be absolutely unacceptable.
It'd be a huge thing. It would be on the New York Times or whatever. The other interesting policy.
They just want to destroy the country. That's it. I mean, really, that is what it is at the end of the day. It's not no more complicated than that.
Yeah. The other interesting policy that they advocate for was expanding the definitions of child care workers. So when you go and look at a lot of these daycare centers, they have all the staff, and all of these staff had to have these certifications. And the intention behind this is that the people that are being employed, obviously are prepared to take care of children and educate children or whatever, but they want to get rid of all of these things and just make it so any person working at these facilities can be on staff and get paid. And it's really convenient then that all of these organizations are then funded, well, not all of them, but a significant portion of these organizations are then funded by the government. But there's this little barrier that doesn't let everybody go and do this, and they just want to get rid of that barrier. It's just like this conflicts of things that make you go crazy when you look at it. So that was this first organization. And then we looked at their partner orgs, because all of these organizations have partner organizations that they work with. And there were two that we found. One was called Think Small. Think Small was another one of these NGO groups. This is, instead of the policy advocacy, they do some policy advocacy, but on the other end is they're a bit more of an action-oriented group where they would help set up daycare centers. And in their 2025 like end of year impact report, they were very proud to announce that they had set up like over 1,500 daycare centers.
Whoa.
Yeah,
wow.
It was an obscene number. It was like some obscene number with even more childcare slots made available. A significant portion of these were specifically in what they call the equity zones, which were for, minority only poor groups. And then and this is one of these organizations that function to open this up. Now we don't know, and we don't have a list of like what these centers were. But undoubtedly, given the fraud that has been seen, either knowingly or not, they most likely set up fraudulent daycare centers. And this organization, of course, gets some sort of kickback from someone or gets some sort of funding, indirectly or directly, from the state. One of the things that was really cool about the Wall Street Journal article we were talking about is he points out that if you go to college and you take federal student loans and you go work for a nonprofit, after a certain amount of years, all of your loans are forgiven.
Yeah.
And so this then becomes a different way for the state to fund these NGOs and this sort of activism.
True. How else are these NGOs funded though? Because I remember last time we were talking about this was in the context of the USAID money and the networks of protesters across the country. What's his name Park McDougald did a great essay on this, exploring the crazy networks of funding behind the Palestine protests. And it's all the same, ultimately it's the Tides Foundation, the Gates, I don't know about maybe Bill and Melinda Gates, but it's the Rockefeller Foundation. Yeah. It's all these old family foundations that have been around forever that I guess have a bunch of money that's just now controlled by descendants, or how are these NGOs funded normally besides from creepy state money?
So there is the state money from it's literally almost like an infinite amount of different avenues.
It is the shadow government, as you're saying. It really is that.
Yeah, one of the things, so you'll find these family offices for these super rich lefties or whatever, they'll do it. Some of these might be like sort of grassroots donations. Some of these are membership dues from states, travel expenses, payments from states. Some of these, and USAID was a great example of like from the federal. I mean, just now when looking through, I think it's Oilfield Rando, who one of the best things that he does is just going through bills and just finding NGO funding. And you'll just find like in proposed bills from the federal, like $1 million to this group that's doing this thing, and so you have all of these different networks of how it works. And some of this is more of the indirect way, like the college reimbursement, which is more like essentially funding the actual like the shock troopers of these groups, kind of forgiving like $100,000 a student debt after a few amount of years. It's a lot of money. And then you have the more direct ways, which are, I mean, we saw the No Kings protests. You saw massive corporations giving endless trunks of money. I mean, Ford was like one of the biggest donators to the.
Is that true? To No Kings too. Well, it's the same network, right? I mean, it's the same network that did BLM and everything else. It's the same like group.
It's a bunch of these, and it's a massive pool of money. What actually really makes a lot of the NGOs significant.
Well, I think that was organized just really quick. I think
it was the Walmart.
No Kings protest, which was one of the worst propaganda concepts of all time. Very Yarvin coded and very like stupid Basquiat crown. The whole thing was very poorly done, and it didn't work at all. But it was, I think, the brainchild or the project of Randy Weingarten, who is the national head of the teachers unions or something.
Oh my God, that's another thing.
Yeah, and so that's again, it's a cycle of money. It's like the NGOs get money from the unions, who then pay for the PACs for the politicians that they want, and it's just free money forever.
Yeah, and what makes the NGOs, frankly, almost more effective or even like dangerous than normal governance. If we kind of put NGOs as a whole, which is this dumb term, but it's the one that works, into this box of this like fifth column of governance. It is a way of governing to happen in a different manner, non-legislatively, not through any sort of electoral politics.
What's the fourth column?
I would assume that the fifth column is like this like extra thing. The other four columns, that's like a saying, right? That's what I'm using as a saying. But it's like this.
The fourth estate. Is the press the fourth estate?
I think the fourth would be the press. The third would be the state. And I forgot what the other ones are. But this sort of other group, the thing that makes them really dangerous is that they can actually move incredibly fast. The No Kings thing was really, really, really fast, remarkably so, faster than any legislative or whatever. But when we look at some of these other groups and what they're able to accomplish, they get a lot of cash injections very quickly because this doesn't go through the state. These are nonprofits, so they can move with the speed of a for-profit organization, of a private party, but they function like a government bureaucracy, or at least influencing these government bureaucracies. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of cases, these organizations also just double dip, right? They double dip into the government, they double dip into the private sector, and then you have these massive, massive war chests to do terrible things with. The one thing that we found that's kind of an example of sort of this double dipping was the American Child Welfare Association, which is this big national group, and they have all these state chapters. So this is a big national group, like your other NGOs. They'll have private funding from donors, from fundraising, all these other sorts of things. And then they'll also have membership dues that they'll get from states. Typically, and when I looked, I think every state was a member. And then in the state of Minnesota, they work directly with the government for creating the program to literally coach people on how to make the daycares. And it didn't matter if they spoke the language or not. What was crazy in that video was they said specifically that this daycare was specifically for the Somali community, which immediately opens up issues of like discrimination.
Well, but we all know those laws are fake. Yeah. So, they'll never enforce one of those. I mean, it would be good. Can we get one Supreme Court? Like, shouldn't there be, while we have this great Supreme Court, shouldn't there be one like they already, I guess they did say no affirmative action, right? And that apparently has been having some impacts, but can't there just be one decision that's like the same as whatever bullshit they have of disparate impact where it's like if you say the slightest thing, or if even there's an imbalance in the numbers, it's a priori proof of discrimination. Like, it seems like we should be able to get like a great common law decision coming down the pike that would say, if you say your fucking public daycare is only for Somalis, that's discrimination. Because you can't say that about white people, can you? No. So not fair. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we got to do away with the whole Civil Rights Act, right? Is that in the Overton window yet? Are we allowed to say this yet, or no?
Is it in the? I think if Charlie was still around, I think it would be.
He would lead it in.
He was already saying it. That was the thing. Charlie was already kind of saying it. I think if there was still big voices that would be willing to kind of point this out, that the Civil Rights Act has, ostensibly functioned in the opposite of what it says it does, right?
Yeah.
It has been developed into a way to enforce discrimination in one way directly, and if there are more people that were willing to kind of point this out, then I think we'd be closer, but not yet, probably not.
Well, and as soon as it starts getting enforced in the other direction at all its proponents will give up on it anyway. Like, all the smart people in DC, as soon as it gets enforced the other direction, every smart left-wing person in DC will suddenly be pro ending the Civil Rights Act, because they'll see, oh, well, this is obviously not tenable, because we want to discriminate against white people all day. So if we can't do that, then So I think actually the Civil Rights Act is going to be repealed like sooner than we think. Okay, let's finish up here. I'm actually curious about federalism. So federalism, if I'm not mistaken, means states' rights.
Sort of. So you have, like, when you go back all the way back in the day, you have Federalists wanted a stronger federal government, and then you had the objections to that were, it would overrule too much of the states. And so then we kind of saw this compromise where we have a lot of state governments, and they're actually much more powerful than people give them credit for, because everyone only focuses on the federal government. Nowadays, when we talk about federalism, it more or less means this sort of balance and a significant kind of more balanced, I guess, for the states, right? That states have more power to operate within themselves than the federal government should within the states. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So obviously SLI is a federalist.
Yeah. We are.
Organization.
This is what we're all about: the state governments and leveraging what is there within the states to do the right things and create a significantly better country in those states. Our sort of motto is like, getting red states to lead the way for the next golden age, which is a little cheesy, but that's the goal. Is you have tremendous opportunity, because a lot of the wealth and power in these blue states, like the first thing that comes to mind, California, New York, these were built over the course of like centuries, and these are built because of a combination of factors. Some of it's just like geography. California has unbelievably good geography, but the recent governance of these states has destroyed them, and in many cases they're shooting themselves in the foot. I think a really good example of this is the wealth tax in California. They're going to get rid of all of the entrepreneurial, big tech people with all the money. They're all going to flee. They're already leaving the state. Over $1 trillion of wealth is already left.
I think good old Peter Thiel's already gone, isn't he?
Oh, it's more than Peter
tell me I'm not breaking that news, but I think
it's more than him. It's been a lot. And so you see all this happen, and where are they going to go? Most of them are going to go, and they've already announced that they're going to go to some other bit more friendly.
But how likely are they really to pass that? Are they really going to pass that?
To be honest, at this point, I think it would probably get passed. Like, given like California.
So can you for people on the call who don't know what you're talking about, can you just say what that is? I know what you're talking about, but what are the details?
The wealth tax in California is marketed as a one-time tax of like 5% of the unrealized capital of billionaires. And what this ends up amounting to is, first of all, no billionaire has the liquidity to pay the realization of the taxes. It's actually significantly worse than that. It's like 3 times. It's actually 3 taxes, not 1. And they also have a disproportionate increase on taxes if the people that are being taxed on these unrealized gains and the shares that they hold in the company have a disproportionate power over their boards. So like the Google guys, the 2 guys that founded Google, they're going to get taxed like way more because they disproportionately own more of the company. And then they would have to then liquefy massive amounts
that's what's insane. That's what's really fucked up.
They'll have to liquefy massive amounts of what they own of the company, which
and
then they'll
give
get
it up.
Capital
give
gain.
it up.
Yeah,
give it
and
up.
This goes out to the state. And this
give
is
it up, rich man.
The best part
give
about
it up.
The best part is that it's marketed
wild.
to pay for California's Medicaid program, because the Medicaid program in California is bankrupt. Most people don't know this, but it's bankrupt. And the reason why
Dude, I had Medicaid in California for like 1 year, and it was the best healthcare I've ever had.
Of course it was.
Far. I'm not surprised at all that it's bankrupt. It was so much better. Everything was free. You never had to wait in line. You could get anything you wanted, anytime, any procedure. It was like now healthcare is just pure misery, and I'm getting taxed, and I can't get an appointment. When you have Medicaid in California, it's like, come right up, sir, free and anything you want. Walk right in.
And
it's unbelievable.
They had this for a while, and then they extended it to illegal immigrants in California. And
even better, even fucking better. Just come right in, get way better healthcare than anybody else.
You got cancer in Mexico, just cross up the border.
Just cross on over. And then we're going back the other way. When we get cancer, now we're going to Mexico because we can't get an appointment because all the Mexicans have the appointments here.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
So that's the wealth tax. But what you're seeing is it's kind of like the thing that has been happening in California, right? People have been leaving for Texas, at least domestically. International immigration to California is still huge. But all of this wealth is going to leave, and we want to create red state. Like, this opens a massive opportunity for red states to have huge cash injections into their economy, huge entrepreneurial giants to come in and actually want to build in their states rather than in blue states that have essentially been killing themselves because they say they're amazing, but they've been standing on the shoulders of people that are long gone. Right?
Yeah. Where are you at on the whole data center debate? Because I think that a lot of the blue states are retardedly saying no data centers, and I think in Mississippi or something, they just made like a bunch of data centers, and it's like been the best thing for the Mississippi economy like ever. So they're trying to say like, hey, AI companies, come to the red states because the blue states are going to fuck you.
Yeah, data centers are weird because, one, they've been really, really bad at marketing. Nobody understands that when people will say like, this data center is going to use 1 trillion gallons of water a year. Nobody understands this is a closed loop, and that it's not like the water's being polluted or whatever. But so the data center, in terms of like capital wanting to go and invest in a state, and especially in a red state, then we're super happy about that. We think that's a great thing. And we think that there are a lot of levers to encourage people to go do this. What is not a good thing about the data centers is these become massively subsidized projects, and massively subsidized by the states. So you see a lot of red states. Texas is probably one of the worst examples of just endless state subsidies going out to corporations. Amazon was building, or I think they are building, a massive data center outside of El Paso, Texas, and like hundreds of millions of dollars are being waived and provided, like in a combination. So when you look at this data, there's a great website called Real Jobs First. It's a great website. It's kind of a lefty NGO, but like nonprofit thing. But all they do is just document all of the mega deals, opportunity zones, and corporate subsidies granted to firms. And in Texas, there's a massive amount that are just not public. So you can see the deal, but you don't know the amount of money. And when you kind of eventually can figure out what the money is, you figure out that this massive data center outside of El Paso, which would be a huge boom for the economy. El Paso is like a C-tier city. It's pretty small. It'd be a huge boom for its economy. But like all of its taxes are being waived, and they're waiving all sorts of taxes on like the purchase of equipment, and they're also subsidizing the project, And the other really concerning thing is,
well, but then what's in it for the state then? Why do they?
what's in
why
the
do
state
they
is
do
that people get jobs and people are happy.
Oh, that's it. Just people get jobs.
Is people get jobs, and the idea is that by partnering with these firms and doing this sort of joint investment. So normally a lot of these will have like a contingent amount of money will be provided by the state if the firm invest a certain amount of money, right? They'll sometimes do even like a 30 cents per dollar match, or like there's different ways that this gets legislated. But the idea is that the state helps invest with the company into building this thing, and then this will result in a massive economic boom for wherever this is happening. The development is not bad, but the way that this is sometimes being developed through these huge subsidy programs and through these tax abatements, this kind of gets really wonky. And this is a way, it's really just a bad way of motivating business to come in here. Because, for example, Texas is the 5th most regulated state in America. People don't realize this. They don't think about this. Texas has almost as many regulations on the books as like Illinois. It's like it's 20. I think it's 20 over 20 million words of regulatory code. And if they wanted to get people to come in easily, they should just do what Idaho did, slash 95% of the regulations, keep the ones that are essential. NEPA and CWA, CAA, these still exist. They're not going to be mass pollution, but you cut a lot of the paperwork. You make it easier for people to do business, and then you don't have to sell people to come to your state over another state with $500 million subsidies for a data center.
But why does SLI care about that? Well, what if SLI is there to empower states to take back power, right?
Yeah.
Why do they care how many regulations that state chooses to have?
Because when regulations there's sort of this when we look at like how America has developed economically for like the last like 30, 40 years probably, and we look at the mass increase of financialization, the deindustrialization and stuff like this, Trump's been trying to address this with tariffs, right? And what we're seeing now is we have 3 levers to get corporations to invest and build and industrialize and whatnot. The levers are tariffs and regulations and corporate subsidies. Regulations have been maxed out to make it as impossible to build, to make it as hard to build as possible in the United States. And this has been going on for like 30, 40 years. Peter Thiel, he wrote about this, how kind of development stopped in the 70s for a reason. And part of this is because of the mass regulation development. So we have this lever's been maxed out, which has been destroying our ability to build real things and have a real economy. And then we're trying to sit here and play with these other 2 levers when we just really should just pull this one back a bit. The tariffs thing is helpful when it comes to a protectionist mindset of giving people an incentive to develop here rather than outsource overseas. And the corporate subsidies is a development to make it easier for corporations to build here rather than going and developing a factory overseas. Because in China, it takes if we look at like a semiconductor factory, for example, which we're also building these here, it takes 2 years to build I think it was 6 to 8 months to build a semiconductor factory in like Taiwan or China on average. In the United States, it takes 3 years. So you're looking at a difference of like 4 times as long, much longer than that, to build, just to get something up and running. They're taking a loss while they're building this. And then just to get to day one, we can start producing a product. It takes 4 times as long than it does overseas. Pulling back on that one lever of regulations would allow for significantly more economic development. And we've seen this, we know this is the case. So in 2019, Idaho, they passed this thing called the Cutting Red Tape Act. They cut all of their regulations by 95%. People don't know this.
Really?
Yes.
By 95%. All of the regulations.
All regulations across the state, 95%.
Not of every kind. I mean, it must be
every kind. It's like literally everything. It was a massive mandate. Yeah, it was huge. And you know what's happened in Idaho since? They have had the largest growing economy in the country year over year for the past 5 years. They have had, I think it was like 25. Now it's probably closer to 30% GDP growth since 2019.
Right. And so I completely agree with this. I agree with this, obviously, as a good goal. But why does SLI, I mean, maybe this is not something that you can answer, but this actually implicates how NGOs work anyway. Why is that a goal? Just for the sake of America?
Yeah. So I think when we look at there's a massive amount of like wealth and industry and development that's happening in states that when you look at them, I don't know a way to describe it other than they feel like they're going to collapse. And on a national scale, I think it's really bad that we have so much stuff in California when California is now proposing wealth taxes. Their programs are going bankrupt. All of they're siphoning out as much money from the private sector as they can to endlessly fund public projects that just don't do anything. And at worst, they don't do anything, or at best, they don't do anything, and at worst, they're literally just fraudulent, right? Like the hundreds of billions spent on homeless that hasn't done anything, right? So when we look at all of these states that are really starting to fail, and the only upside is that they have a very strong private sector because of every reason except for the governance of the state, and even that starting to find decline and issues, then this opens the opportunity for these states to ascend and kind of still maintain the American dominance that we want to see in the world.
Yeah, I get it. So there is a national interest here. It's not, I think that's why it's not just pure federalism, right? I mean, this is about also America.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah. We think that like the way that conservatives ought to be governing, and in many cases they just don't. Got you. Yeah. The way they govern should be better. Like on paper, it should be. They just don't execute. But when they execute, it actually is significantly better, and it produces way better lives for people, and it creates it just makes the state significantly better for the people in it, and also proves as a model of like if you just do this, it works, and it works excellently. And this is what we're really passionate about.
Yeah, you can really feel that in California versus like Florida or Tennessee. You can feel the lack of freedom in California. You really can. I mean, you go to Mexico, it's incredible to go from San Diego to Baja. It's the most stark contrast. I'm surprised more people don't talk about this. I don't think there's like a starker contrast between San Diego and Tijuana. Is there a border that is that stark in the world? Because it's you are going from the most hyper controlled environment to basically third world, but also total freedom. And so it's very interesting.
What's interesting? So I've been to San Diego, and I was in San Diego shortly after, I think, when they cleaned up all of the homeless. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I was there like last August or something with some friends, and we were in awe of like how nice and clean it was.
It's beautiful. Beautiful city.
I haven't been to Baja or like Tijuana or whatever.
Yeah.
But
it's unbelievable. Sorry, no, keep going.
El Paso is this interesting. I would imagine it's maybe inverse. If Baja is nice, Juarez is like the most horrifying thing. And you can drive on the freeway in El Paso and you look to your left if you're driving like westbound. You look to your left and you just see slums and favelas, and it looks like the Sicario, like the scene in Sicario.
Yeah, great.
It looks like that.
That's a Richard Dawkins great shot. So no, Tijuana's a shithole, don't get me wrong.
Okay.
Tijuana, I mean, Baja in general is great, and there's a lot of beautiful stuff there, but TJ, it's shit. But it's just so fucking different. And I mean, I've been to El Paso. El Paso's not nice. San Diego is like really nice. You know what I mean? San Diego's like gorgeous.
Oh,
so it's really weird to go from like San Diego to TJ, but at the same time, it's like you feel the freedom. The second you get down there, you just feel in Baja that you don't have this overwhelming pressure to conform to all these various regulations. And we really do live in a far, far over-regulated society, particularly in Cali. And I think that almost every other state doesn't feel as bad. I remember during COVID, I went up to like Northern California, and I went into Southern Oregon. And Southern Oregon was like, it was like immediately you just like felt like you could do whatever you wanted. There was like, what's beautiful about an unregulated place is like there's so much like culture everywhere. There'll be like a little sandwich shop here, and there'll be like a little, trinket shop over here, and there'll be like, what I hate about Southern California? I hate that there's no like restaurant on the beach. Like the one of the best meals I've ever in Vietnam. There's all these like incredible restaurants that they're right there on the beach. The fisherman goes out into the water and comes back and just. Oh, are you there?
Yeah, I
Oh,
think
yeah, sorry.
camera.
Yeah. Anyway, no, sorry. The fisherman just goes out in the water and comes back with what they caught right there, and then you eat it right there on the beach. That's like what human beings should be doing. If you live by the beach, you should eat the shit that's right there. That's fucking what you should do. In California, there's not even a fucking bar on the beach. You can't go sit on the beach in anywhere in Southern California and go to a bar. That's like absurd to me. And that's just like, what are we doing here? You know, and then as soon as you get to Baja, of course, it's whatever the fuck you want. And of course, where do all the fish come from that we eat in Southern California? What, 10,000 miles to the east in Indonesia? That's where 95% of the fish on menus that we eat comes from. So we're just living this like entirely fake life where we're like, oh, you can't do that. You can't go on the ocean. Here's some fish that you're eating that's not even from there. But look, you can like look but don't touch at the beach. You know?
Yeah. People, I think nobody realizes exactly the insane amount of barriers that are between every single aspect of society. The amount of one thing that's really interesting is when you go and you look at like, when I lived in LA, you would go and see all these like taco stands, right? There's a taco stand on every corner of the road. None of these have to go and get like a health certification. None of these get inspected. They kind of function as these small corporations where they're all run by like one big group, and they set up these different taco stands across the city, but they don't deal with any of the legislative overhead and regulatory overhead everyone else does.
Yeah.
And this other aspect of it's just impossible to do things. And this is really bad. It's terrible. Like, it should be easy to do things, but it's not.
Totally agree. I would think we should get rid of all the regulations everywhere. It's really true. No, I mean, business, needs to find a way. It's like, oh, well, because one person got sick one time. Like, yeah, get out of here. I'm with you. All right, man. Dude, very fascinating. Very interesting. SLI, States Leadership Initiative, Jacob Waymeyer. What do you want to say before you go?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. If any people working in state governments, if they're listening, if you want to get into contact, you can email me. This is Jacob at State Leadership. You can also follow our X page, which is at Red States Lead. But yeah, thank you for having me. We're really looking forward to this year because we're hoping to really kind of give it to some of these NGOs. We're hoping to really defund a lot of them. So that's the goal.
Cool. Hell yeah. Defund the NGOs. I'm with you there. All right, man. Thanks. See you later.
Thank you.